Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today, I'm continuing my series of reading the winners of the Man Booker Prize in order, and I'm up to 1973, so I still have a long way to go. But this 1973 winner of the Man Booker Prize was The Siege of Krishnapur by J.G. Farrell. Now, you may remember I read another book by J.G. Farrell a couple months ago, I don't know, several months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. It was a previous book that also won a Booker Prize, kind of an honorary Booker Prize for a year that they skipped originally. It was called Troubles, and it was about Ireland. This book is about India. It's part of a trilogy of books that he released that are about the British Empire and specifically the decline and fall of the British Empire, looking at three different sort of colonial outposts of Britain at the waning days of the empire and what's going on there. I liked Troubles. I thought Troubles was a fun book. It was well written. It had a little kind of gothic sensibility to it of this kind of decaying hotel in Ireland. It had a little bit of humor. I thought it was pretty good. I have to say I did not enjoy The Siege of Krishnapur nearly as much. And I'll talk about why, but let's go through kind of the story first. It is set in a small outpost called Krishnapur in India, British-occupied India. And there's a little town there, and there's a few kind of colorful local characters who live there. Most notably is the collector, who's like a government official who's sort of in charge of the town. And then he's visited by this Englishman named Fleury, who's sort of an artistic type, and he's a little bit naive, and he's sort of taking a journal, writing a book about what the Indian continent is like. And he's hoping to kind of get married to this local, or not local girl, but this other British girl who's there. There's a couple of doctors who are arguing over the proper ways to treat diseases, and a few other people just randomly scattered around the town. And it's sort of the interactions between these people. And while they're there is a native uprising. The local Muslim population has decided they've had enough of British colonial rule, and they are going to attack the city, and it becomes under siege. And everyone just sort of has to deal with this. They don't take it very seriously at first, but it kind of escalates and escalates and escalates and gets more and more serious and eventually violent towards the end as this goes on. And the characters are all very steadfastly stiff upper lip British types. They are not very interested in what the Indian people think. And one of the notable things about this book is that the Indian point of view is never really explored at all. There's like one Indian character, but you never really hear very much from him. And I think that's deliberate to kind of make a point about the superiority complex that the British have, and their fact that they're kind of dismissive and uninterested in the Indian point of view. There's a little bit of conversation about kind of how baffled and bewildered they are by the Indian religion and how it conflicts with their own religion. There's also a priest there, and so there's conversation about the differences between Hinduism and Christianity and Islam and Christianity and things like that, which is interesting. But it's really about kind of the British are very superior and haughty and think that they're better than the Indians and don't really care what they have to say or think. And so it's making a point about colonialism. That's sort of the main point of the book, is that. And that's kind of, first of all, the point of departure I take from it. Not that I agree with colonialism, I don't, but I am a little bit bored by these sort of critiques of colonialism because I feel like it's just the same thing over and over again. Like, everybody does it. Everybody says, oh, look, these empires are bad. And it's this kind of this rote thing that's repeated without thought. And to me, yet another novel about how evil colonial empires are is just not very interesting. It's been said before, it's been done before, and I know this is from the 70s, so maybe it hadn't been done quite so much then, but it's just not a topic that I'm super interested in. So it didn't really grab my attention right off the bat. I didn't find it as humorous as Troubles. I found it a little bit more serious, and so I didn't engage with it quite as much. And I found the plot fairly dull. Very little happens because they're under siege, so they're just kind of like huddled around waiting for things to happen, and nothing really happens for most of the book. And I find that quite dull, and the conversations weren't engaging to me. I know this is a very highly praised book. I mean, won the Booker Prize, and there's quotes on the back calling it one of the best British novels of the last century, things like that. It just didn't click with me. And I'm interested in Britain very much, and I'm also interested in India. I read E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, and I liked that. And it's sort of a topic I have interest in, but this just, I don't know, it didn't really click with me. I found it just fairly dull. And one of the things, which I've said many times on this channel before, that I value in novels, and I think make great novels that you want to revisit over and over again and reread and get more out of, is great characters. You want great, big, epic characters who are memorable and distinctive, characters who you cheer when they succeed and you cry when they lose or when they die, or the opposite, characters that you cheer when they fall because they're villains, but you care, you're invested in their story, you care what happens to them, you want them to either succeed or fail, you have a stake in what goes on. And I find that these characters are really lacking that. I found them fairly indistinguishable from each other, not in terms of like their roles they play. Obviously there's a priest and a doctor and a collector but they all, like, their personalities weren't sufficiently distinct for me to really like make a mental picture of who these people are. And I didn't really care what happened to them because I didn't find them particularly likable or interesting, and I didn't find them hateable enough to be rooting for their downfall. So I just wasn't emotionally connected to the story of this book. Didn't do it for me. And it's a shame because, like I said, these are topics that I'm interested in. I think there's fertile ground for exploration, but I think just the kind of, condemnation of colonialism without much more thought than that is a little bit shallow ground to base a novel on. It's been done so many times. We all know, yes, it's bad, it's fine. But like, I don't like moralizing in novels either. I don't like preaching and saying, this is how you're supposed to feel about this, and this is, the right moral stance to take. I think that's sort of boring. I like more complex morals in novels for the most part, where, like, one of my favorite novels is, I've talked about Victor Hugo on this channel many times. I love Les Miserables. Great novel. Great characters, big, powerful characters who you care about. And one of my favorite characters in all of literature is Inspector Javert. Javert is the villain, the antagonist of that piece, but he's got a super interesting character traits and arc where he's got his own moral code that he's following, and he thinks he's in the right, and he thinks he's doing the right thing, and he's convicted at that. He's convinced of himself. And that's a great character because, like, you understand where he's coming from. And even though he's in the wrong and you're rooting against him, you can see why he would have that kind of moral view. And that's kind of moral complexity is what's interesting. It's looking at the human condition and seeing what makes people tick. Whereas if you draw people as just, this is a snooty, out of touch British man who doesn't understand the culture that he's colonizing, that's sort of one-dimensional, It's not that interesting to me. So I really don't have much to say about this book. I will say it did kind of win me round a little bit towards the end. I was pretty down on it for the first 2/3. And then at the end, the siege finally breaks through the city's defenses, and there's like actual fighting going on inside, and that gets pretty exciting, and there's some fun parts in that, and there's actually some funny parts in that as well. That's when the humor of the book started to work for me. And I liked that part of the book, but for like the first 2/3 of it, it just dragged on, and I really just couldn't find myself moved to really care about it very much. It's a medium-length novel, about 450 pages. It took me a little while to get through, but I will not be revisiting the third book in the series, which takes place in Singapore, I believe. I thought the first one was fine. This one I liked a little bit less, but I'm not interested enough to revisit the third. So onward and upward, we'll be moving on with the next book in the Booker Prize series, which I have to order because I haven't done that yet. And I'll get to that at some point. But I have a few other treats for you beforehand, other things that I've been reading, what was kind of longer books that are taking me longer to get through. But I'm going to finish some of them over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about some longer books. And I think there's going to be some really interesting discussions to be had. So make sure you stick around. And if you enjoyed this review and want to see more of my stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. Leave me comments down below, and come back every Wednesday for yet another book review from me, your humble host, Logan Albright. I try to read one book every single week and talk about it here, and I do a pretty good job of keeping up with it. I only miss a couple weeks a year usually. So thanks for watching. I'm sorry I didn't have more of a deep dive on this book for you. I really just didn't have enough of an emotional engagement with it to really want to talk about it too much, because it just didn't do it for me. But next week, hopefully, will be different. So check me back next Wednesday. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.